Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Scott Ritter, and and I will be talking about the Chinese balloon that went over the United States. So, Scott, your version of what happened and what they're saying on TV was diametrically opposed. What's your view on the balloon?
Well, first of all, I think it's imperative that we understand that American airspace is inviolable. It's part of our sovereignty, and you just can't simply fly things over our territory willy-nilly. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for us to fly over Chinese territory, and it's not acceptable for them to fly things over our territory. So we have every right to be concerned about this, but we also have to mitigate this concern with a realistic appreciation of what exactly is happening here. If I were driving home in a snowstorm and I pulled into the wrong garage, the wrong driveway, thinking it was my house, and I, diddy bop up to the door and open the door and walk in, am I breaking and entering for burglary, or did I make a mistake? So we're trying to paint this as China somehow launching an attack on America with this balloon, that it's spying. We're calling it a potential delivery system for a nuclear device, the electromagnetic impulse weapon that can, basically blind American radars and everything like that. And then we treat it as a military attack. I mean, as the balloon left American airspace, I mean, it's no longer a threat to us, and it's pretty much the balloon that's held hostage by the jet stream. It's going to go where it's going to go, and it's going to lead away from there. We then attacked it with an F-22 fighter firing a modern air-to-air missiles. So we engaged in an act of war against this object. We treated it as a military attack on American soil. Did we have the right to shoot it down? Yes, we did. We had the right. Just like if I bebopped into your house in the middle of the night thinking it's my house, if you thought I was a burglar, maybe you could shoot me and say he broke into my house. Well, yeah, but I didn't really. I sort of accidentally strolled in there, and it was an accident. This balloon, I don't believe the Chinese planned to put this balloon over the United States. There's no reason for them to do this. Everybody's talking about Chinese trolling. The Chinese are out there trolling. China is actually a mature nation. Newsflash to America: it's a real country, It has a government that's very serious and very good at what it does. If you don't think so, why don't we do this? You go to the New York subway system, ride around it for a little while, and then get on Amtrak and go anywhere you want in America. Film it, and then fly to China. And go on the Chinese subway system, and then get on the Chinese high-speed rail system anywhere you want to go in China and film it. And then come back, drink a couple beers, drink a glass of wine, and play the images side by side, and tell me who's doing a better job. All right? The Chinese aren't amateurs. These aren't a bunch of children. They're not little, they're not playing theatrical one-upsmanship games. It's a serious country doing serious business around the world better than we do. Now, what is the purpose of the balloon? The Chinese claim that it's for, civilian research related to climate change. And if you take a look at the history of China, I actually did. They've been floating, balloons up in the sky, collecting critical climatological data. Big words Marines shouldn't use, multiple syllables, but they're collecting climate-related data and about particles, water particles, things like that. And they've been floating these balloons for a long time. If the balloon, they have tethered balloons, and then they have untethered balloons. And if an untethered balloon breaks communication and starts floating, once a balloon here, and here's the news flash to you guys, even though, yes, it has propellers, even it has a rudder, and so that means it can change direction a little bit, go up and down a little bit, but it is held hostage to the jet stream. Once it goes that way, it can't come back this way. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. And maybe The system has an internal self-correction system. You know, like when you when we fly a drone, if a drone breaks contact with its control station, it then will go into a pattern seeking to make new contact. So we'll go into an automatic default mode looking to make contact. So when you're trying to explain what this balloon is doing, because people saying it showed evidence of maneuverability. Yeah, I think what was going on is its internal system was saying lost contact, turn, but the jet stream's moving, brake, move, turn, brake, move. Oh yeah, and it brought it over some areas that were of concern to us. But people who think that you're going to use a balloon to take photographs of American silos, what camera system do you think's on that thing? Remember, it's a balloon in the jet stream being moved by wind. So you would need a gyro stabilized platform that weighs a lot. It's expensive. So let's say you have that. Now you're taking the imagery. Are you going to store that imagery on a disk? Well, how are you going to get it? The balloon just sort of floating over everywhere. How are you going to get it? Or is that going to transmit the data to a satellite and then bounce it off and bring it back to China? Wait a minute, let's back this up a second. Transmit the data to a satellite. Why would you send it to a satellite when the satellite can take a better picture of anything the balloon can take a picture of? And the Chinese have satellites in geosynchronous orbit over the United States taking photographs of everything. This whole concept that this is an intelligence collection platform is stupid, ignorant, dumb. The only thing China was able to collect over the American territory was, again, meteorological data at high altitude, which, if we were smart, we would have asked them to share because it could give us insights into global warming, which we all claim we're concerned about. We shot the darn thing down. I mean, this is literally stupidity. And this is because the American people are conditioned to view everything about China in a negative fashion. We're not allowed to assume innocence. We're not allowed to assume normalcy. We can only assume that the Chinese are nothing but a bunch of yellow, slant-eyed plotters sitting in Beijing going, hong, 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 hong. I mean, it's a cartoon caricature of it, and it's insulting to Chinese, probably as insulting as my imitation was. And I don't mean to insult him. I'm just showing you how stupid Americans are, that this is what we think. You know, could the Chinese have done a better job of communicating? Well, again, they probably did. I will bet you a dime to a dollar that they made multiple phone calls to their American counterparts saying, we lost a balloon. The balloon's floating. It's a civilian research balloon. But see, we can't believe them because we just assume that that's nefarious intent. They are claiming to have lost the balloon, but we see the balloon maneuvering. Therefore, we believe the balloon's under control. Well, hey, guys, why didn't you take one of our wonderful intelligence collection platforms and fly it alongside like an RC-135? It's an electronic and a signals collection platform. Fly it alongside the balloon and collect the signals coming to and from it, and determine what those signals are. Is it receiving instructions about maneuvering? The answer is no. Is it transmitting data? The answer is no. Is anything happening in that balloon? Yeah, there's a beacon sitting out saying, find me, find me, find me. But it's a beacon with limited range and duration, limited power, because it is a balloon that can't carry a lot of weight. This is literally the dumbest thing ever. This is much ado about nothing, but now what we've done is further strain already tenuous diplomatic relations between the United States and China. You know, why aren't the American people demanding that the FBI make public everything they found in the wreckage? Why are we allowing it to be hidden behind a wall of secrecy? You know, people are talking about the intelligence community. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about the intelligence community. They're not very good. They're not very good at what they do, because especially when they have to assess things they don't know anything about. This balloon took them by surprise. How do we know that? Because apparently, when we started looking at the data, people went back in history and went, holy cow, it looks like 3 of these balloons actually flew over our territory before. And we had no idea, which means we weren't tracking these balloons, which means we didn't have analysts who were focused on what these balloons are. So now we had to reverse engineer it, and we have to go back and say, it's out of, Hainan Island and all that. So now you have intelligence analysts trying to breathe life into old imagery and trying to assess from a million miles away, 10 years distant, what was going on. And they are prejudiced by assumptions made by politicians that it is nefarious, so you must interpret nefarious intent in everything. This is what we do as an intelligence community. You should have good analysts who aren't infected with political bias, but not anymore. You don't get promoted in the intelligence community unless you kowtow to political bias. So now the intelligence community is telling the political people what they want to hear. The last thing you want is a Scott Ritter coming up and saying, no, boss, it's an innocent civilian balloon. That's not a message they want to hear. And I wouldn't be allowed to make that presentation at the White House. My career-oriented counterpart will say, no, boss, this is evil intent. We determined that this is a bad balloon. And they go, oh, you get to go brief the president now. That's how it works, ladies and gentlemen. The intelligence community is fundamentally corrupted from an integrity standpoint. Their analysis is almost always politically slanted, therefore always politically wrong. So don't tell me, well, the intelligence community says this. I don't buy that.
Excuse me.
I didn't mean to upset you.
And so have you been following this story on the news, and what's your opinion of what's being said?
Well, the news, again, with very few exceptions, is buying into the government narrative, as the news does with everything the government does. I mean, the mainstream media is nothing more than a stenographer for the government. So when the government wants to put out a message, the mainstream media will repeat that message. So that if you're watching the news, the primary message you're getting is what the government is saying. On the periphery, there might be some alternative points of view, but those are buried in, the 56th paragraph, 13 lines in, where somebody says, well, it may just be a civilian balloon. But then almost immediately you get an expert opinion that's 4 paragraphs long that says, no, we deem it not to be civilian for this reason, and this reason, and this reason. Don't trust the mainstream media. Don't.
Wow. And have you always felt like this about the mainstream media? I mean, you were on mainstream media all the time back in the early 2000s, right?
Well, in the late 1990s too. Well, I avoided the media like the plague while I was on active duty. I was an intelligence officer, so I can't speak to the media. I mean, every once in a while when I was an inspector in the Soviet Union, I was pulled aside to do the media event where we would go and talk to reporters about what happened in Vodkin. So if you Google my name, you might find a couple of stories that say, well, you spoke to the media then. Yeah, I was in a very controlled environment. I wasn't there providing unfettered analysis. That only happened after I left the United Nations Special Commission. But what I learned while I was in the United Nations, what I learned during the Gulf War, what I learned as an inspector is, well, again, I could just provide a couple quick examples. As an inspector, with the INF Treaty, responsible for monitoring SS-20 missile production at Vodkin to make sure they weren't producing it, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which was opposed at many levels to this treaty because they believed the Soviets were cheating, they were actively leaking to the mainstream media a figure of 200 missiles that were being held by the Soviets that were unaccounted for. So the DIA was leaking intelligence information, highly classified intelligence information, to the media using a guy named Bill Gertz, who was writing for the Washington Times, I believe it was. And so he would write these articles that are derived from top secret classified documents, saying the Russians are cheating because U.S. intelligence community says there's 200 missiles. Well, I was the inspector on the ground in the Soviet Union at the factory that produced the missiles. And after doing what I do, I was able to reverse engineer the manufacturing process and come up and say, the most they can do, because I did the timings of the trains moving from point A to point B, did the measurements, looked at the buildings, looked at the incoming flow, looked at the outcoming flow. There was a lot of work done. I didn't just guess. And I came out and I said, 60 to 80 missiles a year is maximum production. That's it. Norm is 60. They could up it to 80. They can't go much higher than that because the plant simply doesn't have the capacity to do that. Well, gosh, this changed everything. So the CIA, I wrote a report for the CIA, and the CIA put that report into the overall database, which all analysts now draw upon. And what happened is the people who were detractors of that, when they couldn't intimidate me into backing down, started leaking information to the press to be magnified by Jesse Helms in the United States Senate about cheating, cheating, cheating. It was all lies, all lies. But I'm sitting there going, why is the press doing this? This isn't reporting. They are simply receiving bad information and then trying to treat it as good information for political purposes. So very early in my career, I saw this. During the Gulf War, I saw the same thing when it came to the Patriot missile performance and our ability to destroy Scud missiles. I knew because I was on the inside, and when I say inside, I mean the inside, General Schwarzkopf's staff in the bunker with access to everything. I knew we weren't shooting down a single Scud missile with Patriot. But that's not the message that the government was giving media. The Raytheon Patriot missile was brilliant, shooting down everything. Scud buster, Scud buster. It was all lies put out for political purpose. And the same thing about destroying Scud missiles before they could launch against Israel. We didn't destroy a single one. And yet we were telling the press that we were destroying everything because politically we had to convince Israel that we could destroy the missiles to keep Israel out of war. It was all a lie. When I worked for the Special Commission as a weapons inspector, again, not bragging, but almost every major confrontation between the United Nations and Iraq that could lead to war was an inspection that I led. So I was the center of the storm on a continuous basis, which means that when the Security Council met in emergency session, I was the center of attention. They were talking about my issues, the ones that I briefed national governments on, about inspection teams that I led, I conceived. I knew everything about it. I was there in the meetings when they talked about it. And yet the American diplomat would sneak out the back near the end and go to his New York Times source and talk and spin it. And the next day there would be a headline story about that meeting discussing what I was doing, and it was spinning it completely wrong, lies. So I knew from the very beginning it was a lie. Then I worked for NBC News when I came out. I was in the newsroom working. Tom Brokaw loved me, and he was the big man at NBC. And so I would be there. I'd have access to Tom. I was on his newscasts. But I saw as the news reports came in, they would come to me and say, okay, you're the Iraq guy. I'd say, okay, this is what it means. This is what's happening, da, da, da. Then I'd watch Tom Brokaw read the news that night, and it's 180 degrees different because he received a phone call from the White House to change it. I was fired from NBC News because I was confronting Sandy Berger with his lies. And basically, Sandy Berger told NBC News, fire him or you no longer have access to the Sunday White House room. So I got fired. So I know it's all a lie. I worked for Fox News. Within a couple months, Fox News stopped putting me on air because my message was inconvenient. But they didn't cancel my contract, which meant that for the remaining 4 months of the contract, I couldn't go on air. It was designed to silence me. I've known from day one that there's collusion between the government and media. But the way you defeat that is by always telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But sadly, there's no one out there that's willing to do that today. That's on the inside. That's just the sad state of affairs.
Mhm. So you're working on a number of projects. How are they going?
Oh, well, I mean, now that I can focus on them, we had a little bit of drama the last couple of weeks over, a anti-war rally that's taking place next week. But that drama, as far as I'm concerned, is past, and now I'm moving on, and everything's going well. Everything's going very well, I should say, extraordinarily well.
Would you like to discuss it, or do you want to save it for another time?
I think it would be premature to discuss it at this point in time because, as the past week has shown, I have a lot of enemies out there, and I'm just not going to basically tee a ball up and let them take a swing at it. I'll let things solidify. I'll let things become irreversibly grounded, and then we can talk about it. But right now, to talk about things would be to expose potential weaknesses that allow these enemies to disrupt. And they've shown a proclivity to try and destroy me and destroy what I'm trying to accomplish. So I'm just not going to make it easy for them. They got to work for it.
And how's your book coming?
Book's coming on very well. I mean, it's resonating quite well. I think people are catching on to the message. The message is becoming attractive, not only here in the United States, but abroad. I'm very proud of the book. And as I told the publisher when I wrote it, I said, this isn't a book that's going to be published and then go away. This is a book that's going to be around for a long time, be relevant for a long time, because it's not dependent upon current affairs, meaning that I didn't write about current affairs. Because if you write about current affairs, it's a great book for about 3-4 months, but then the whole story changes. People were trying to tell me, Scott, you got to write a book about the war. And I remember there's heavy pressure on me to do a quick book in August. They were like, you got to write it, you got to write it, it's got to be published. And I said, guys, this is stupid, because I'm going to turn this book over to you, and your production timelines are such it's going to take you 2 weeks to do this, 3 weeks to get it out there. And I said, you're going to publish it in September. And I make the following promise: the war will be completely different in September than it is the way I write it. I can't tell you how it's going to be different, but it's going to be completely different. So you can put a lot of time and effort to put a book out that will be outdated and useless the moment it's printed. And sure enough, in September, Ukraine launched its major offensive that changed the whole dynamic of the war. That's why I did, but my book, Disarming the Time of Perestroika, isn't because it's a work of history. It's already happened. I encapsulated it. What makes it valuable is the example it sets for what we need to do going forward. So it's not just a work of history, it's a template for the future that will never change. That template will be valid now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. So this book has legs, and this is a campaign, not a battle. A lot of books, you go out there and you're fighting a battle to take advantage of this limited window of relevance. This book is going to be relevant for a decade.
So how can people get it?
Well, you can get the book. Clarity Press is the publisher. You can go to claritypress.com. Or if you want to help me out, you can go to scottritterextra.com, because when you buy the book there, yes, you go to Clarity will ship it, but we get a little something there. When I say a little something, it's a little something. So the only way it actually works is if a lot of people buy the books, and then that little turns into maybe I get to buy a hamburger. But that's that. And there's another feature too. I think a lot of people have been talking about autographed books. And so we now have a way that if somebody wants an autographed book, you can actually go. It's going to cost you more because of shipping and all that. You have to buy the book, you have to pay for the shipping, you have to pay for the handling, then you have to pay a little fee that makes it worthwhile for us. But I think for $50, you'll get an autographed book at your doorstep if you live in the United States. We haven't figured out how we're going to do it in Europe, because I've been sending books to Europe because I'm an idiot and I don't understand business. I've been sending books to Europe, and it cost me $49 in postage to send it, and that's a sunk loss. I don't get that back. And so I not only don't make any money off the book, I lose. I have to sell 3 books to pay for the cost of shipping 1 book to Europe. So we don't know how to make that work in Europe, but in the United States, if you go to scottritterextra.com, you can order an autographed book if you want to.
Great. So Scott, you're a busy person, and I'm gonna keep my eye on what's going on, in the news, and I'll be contacting you again for your comments about current events and so forth. So if any final thoughts before we say goodbye for the day?
I just want to thank you for all you do for again, not just for me. I mean, it's selfish, of course, for me to thank you. I mean, it's, of course I'm going to thank you because you're helping me out. But I'm thanking you for the service you provide to the community. I think you are an invaluable resource, and not just about the interactions with me, but any interaction you do with anybody. I think you provide a unique kind of journalism that hopefully will get the attention it deserves.
I love doing this because I schedule a Zoom meeting, and then I put it on my YouTube channel, and I get to talk to the best people, and it's a lot of fun, and I make new friends. I mean, you can't go wrong doing that, right?
Can't go wrong doing that. Make new friends and help influence people in a positive way. So
Right.
I applaud you for what you're doing, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. You've been listening to Scott Ritter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.